Good evening, here's Top News English newsletter starting with headlines. Syrian army inflicts heavy losses upon terrorists in several areas across the country. Zionist forces bomb university in Gaza Strip. US lawmakers pass urgent funding of Israel's Iron Dome. And Turkey admits that over 1,000 extremists join ISIS. Welcome to details. Syrian army units on Saturday continued military operations against terrorists and their dens and hideouts in several areas across the country, inflicting heavy losses upon them. A military source said that the units of the armed forces destroyed terrorists' boats in Arrestan Lake near the villages of Kisin and Al-Ghajar in Hom's countryside. Terrorists' attempt to attack one of the military posts was thwarted in Al Ain Valley in the south of Al-Qaritain in Palmyra countryside, where a number of terrorists were killed and injured. In Aleppo, all members of an armed group were eliminated in the vicinity of Al-Aziza village, as other terrorists were killed and wounded in Aleppo city and its countryside. A military source informed that other units of the army destroyed more than 26 cars were used by terrorists in Khan al-Asal, Qubtan al-Jabal, and two vehicles, one of them equipped with anti-aircraft machine gun in Aleppo countryside. Another gatherings for terrorists' cars with all the terrorists inside were destroyed in Al-Rashidin neighborhood in Aleppo. In Gaza, the Israeli regime's warplanes have bombarded a major university in the besieged Gaza Strip. The number of possible casualties of Israel's latest Saturday strike on the university is not known. However, hours before the strike, attacks on the besieged enclave left over 24 people dead. The highest number of casualties has occurred in areas west of Rafah, where an Israeli attack killed at least 35 people. On Friday, Rafah was the scene of the deadliest Israeli attacks. In days, over 100 Palestinians were killed there in a heavy bombardment of the town by the Israeli military. The attack was launched immediately after it was reported that an Israeli soldier has been captured by resistance fighters. Hamas denies they hold the Israeli trooper, saying he has probably died in clashes. Friday's escalation came after Israel abruptly ended a 72-hour humanitarian ceasefire with Hamas only a few hours after it began. The Palestinian death toll in Israel's onslaught on Gaza has now reached nearly 1,650, with 9,000 people injured. Most of the casualties have been civilians, including a large number of women and children. In Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said on Saturday that a ceasefire plan proposed by his country provided a chance to end fighting between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, but warned that lost time further complicated matters. The Egyptian initiative is a real chance to find a real solution to the crisis taking place in the Gaza Strip, he told reporters in Cairo during a joint press conference with Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Lost time complicates the situation more and more, he added. In the United States, U.S. lawmakers have overwhelmingly approved an emergency measure in the nation's Congress to grant $225 million in additional funding to the Zionist regime for its Iron Dome missile defense system amid the Israeli brutal onslaught on the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. U.S. Senate's Democratic Majority Leader Harry Reid received unanimous consent from fellow lawmakers Friday morning when he asked them to consider approving the measure, the Hill newspaper reported. The lower U.S. House of Representatives also overwhelmingly passed the additional funding measure Friday evening by a vote of 395 to 8. The package will put nearly $250 million towards the Israeli regime's missile system, which is jointly built by the giant U.S. arms maker Raytheon, as Zionist forces continue their campaign against the besieged Palestinian enclave. In Iraq, Kurdish troops fought off a jihadist attack on an oil facility and a dam near the Iraqi city of Mosul, but lost 14 of their number in intense combat, Kurdish sources said on Saturday. The Islamic State, which controls the northern city, attacked a Peshmerga post in Zumar on Friday, and a fierce battle erupted, an official in the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan said. He said that 14 Peshmerga fighters were killed, a toll confirmed by a senior officer in the Kurdish force. In Libya, the British Embassy has suspended all operations and staff are leaving the country due to a recent upsurge in violence. It comes as 8 Britons were among 186 evacuated from Libya and taken to the Greek port of Piraeus on a Greek Navy frigate. Militias are now holding increasing sway in the country as the central government, police and military have lost much of their authority. They have filled the power vacuum that was left after the ousting of Muammar al-Gaddafi in 2011. Fighting between rival militias has escalated over the past 2 weeks, prompting many Western governments to pull their diplomats out of the country. A British embassy convoy was fired at during an attempted carjacking on Sunday, resulting in all UK nationals being urged to leave the country immediately. In Turkey, the number of Turkish extremists fighting under the umbrella of the ISIS Tekfiri terrorist group is slightly more than 1,000, according to Turkish officials who admit that they are unable to learn the exact number. The estimated number of armed ISIS terrorists is around 12,000 to 15,000, which shows that Turks make up less than 10% of the extremist group. Turkey has long been accused of not efficiently controlling its borders to prevent those foreigners joining the Tekfiri groups and halt the flow of weapons into Syria. In response to these criticisms, Turkish officials have noted the difficulty of controlling a nearly 900 kilometers long border while blaming Western countries for not sharing intelligence on potential recruits for the extremist groups. There were allegations that there was a charity inside Turkey dedicated to recruiting terrorists for the insurgency in Syria and Iraq. In separate news, Turkish media broadcast a few days ago pictures of hundreds of men with long beards in Taliban-style dress gatherings for Eid al-Fitr somewhere in Istanbul. The group was allegedly linked with ISIS and they dedicated their Eid al-Fitr prayers to ISIS terrorists in Iraq and Syria. And finally, the European Union has quietly agreed to lift restrictions supplying Kiev with military technology and equipment which can be used for the repression in the country, the Russian Foreign Ministry said. During a recent meeting of the Council of Europe in Brussels, leaders of EU member states agreed on the quiet to remove restrictions on exports to Kiev of equipment that could be used for internal repression, the ministry said in a statement on its website. Exports of military technologies and equipment were also allowed. Moscow slammed the move as contradicting the rules of military technologies and ammunition exports which have been earlier applied by the EU and also pierced by double standards. The decision to restart issuing licenses for special military equipment exports came despite the continuing anti-terrorist operation in eastern Ukraine, the ministry said. The ministry called upon its European counterparts to follow logic, not the prodding from Washington. The decision to limit the supply of ammunition and weaponry to Ukraine should have been introduced after the launch of the so-called anti-terrorist operation in Donetsk and Lugansk regions. It's not too late to restore the ban, the ministry said. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dima Yunus. Good night.